The conversation around violence against women in Australia is rightly front and centre in our society. Every story that we see about yet another woman dying at the hands of her partner is horrible and rightly grabs the headline. Yet that story isn't mentioning the multiple women who attend ER or seek refuge because they are also victims of violence or abuse. I'm incredibly concerned about the safety of my wife and my stepdaughter, these two women who I adore, and they're out in the world, which cannot be a very safe place for them sometimes. Yet I am also incredibly concerned about my son. This young, innocent 4-year-old boy with a big, enormous, kind heart and empathy, which I still can't achieve. And I'm 50. This little boy will grow up into a country where, according to the most recent statistics, he is twice as likely to die by a homicide than a woman is. And he is also far more likely than a woman to be a victim of violence. And when you expand that a bit to think that the idea that my son would one day be a perpetrator, that is just far too horrible to imagine. But when you look at the stats, there are kids his age, 4-year-olds, right now, running around in a park somewhere. And 20 years from now, one of them will use violence as the best response to a situation. It's terrible to think about. Being a young man is really dangerous. I've been one. Now, none of this is to say that one is better or worse off than the other. I'm certainly not looking to draw any kind of moral equivalence. I guess for me, when I think about this little boy, I wonder if asking men to do better, which while I understand, that is quite understandable. I wonder though, would it be more effective if we asked a different question? And that question, for example, might be, how can we help young men learn to express their masculinity and express their identity in a healthy way when they're young, so that once they change size and shape in their teen years, they are a lot less of a danger to themselves and to other people around them? And it's this question which led me directly to Maggie Dent. Thank you for coming around. How's your cuppa?
It's good.
To have an afternoon cup of tea with you is just
That's right.
one of this world's great joys, great delights. I would have joined you, but I've had enough caffeine
No.
today.
Okay.
Yeah, I know,
Yep.
enough to know that I've had enough.
That's one of your lessons you have learnt in life, isn't it?
Yep, it took me probably longer than I would have liked.
So, Dr. Bruce Robinson, who created the Fathering Project, we did some crazy stuff recently just to stick up on YouTube because we're both old wise farts. And he said, I keep reminding men about Joe. And I said, who's Joe? He said, the joy of enough.
Ha.
There's a lot of depth in that, isn't there?
Yeah, I was talking to someone else who went to my school, a bit older than me, but went to my school. He was a guest this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, say this is a beer here. I'm like, the good times are about this. The good times are about this much into the next one. That's when things are going to get good. But
No, the best you feel
never
is
get
after
there.
your second, and that's it. And you go, God, I'm feeling this good. Let's double it. No, it goes downhill. I have a very tight. The boys all know.
How did you talk to your boys about alcohol? And did it work?
Well, I had really strict rules, right? And that was you're not going out to parties where there's alcohol until you're in year 11, which is the year you turn 16. Right? I'm never buying you alcohol. I never want you to get in a car with anyone who's drinking. I'll come and pick you up because you didn't have, ride shares and things in those days. And I made sure that we didn't have spirits or anything in the house, and because they probably wouldn't drink it if I was around. But if you had a few of your mates, yeah, sorry, that's
people
gonna
go, they're Indiana Jones.
And I can trust my son. I went, no, you can trust your son until his mates are there. And then it's a little pack thing that happens, and there's very little capacity to be able to hold a ground if you and your mates are having some fun and taken risky choices. Yeah.
I'm one of 4 boys. I didn't realise how much my decision making was impaired by the amount of other boys and then later on in life men that I was around until probably way later than I should have. What do you tell teen boys? And I know so your latest, your Australia's most successful independent author?
No, God, no.
Close to it?
No, God, no. Just somebody.
You've sold a shitload of books.
Yeah, no, okay.
But
10th and final coming, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you've written one of the more recent ones about teenagers, right?
Yeah.
What do parents of particularly teenage boys, what do they need to know about your son's decision-making capabilities once more boys are added into the mix?
Yeah, we need to go back one more step, and that is that, the prefrontal cortex, which helps us make really good decisions.
It's a bit of our brain.
Executive
just
part at
behind
the front.
Yeah.
Is just so underdeveloped, which means that when we say, what were you thinking and why did you do that? Two, when you get into these adolescent years, you're wired for more risk.
Yeah.
And boys are hunting dopamine. They want to have fun, right? They want to make their mates laugh. They want to do dumb shit. And they're biologically wired to be drawn to their peers and their mates. Same for girls. And there's a really important reason for that, Osher, and that is if you were in a traditional kinship community, the girls need to go find a bunch of girls because they're going to start breeding soon, and the boys need to go and move away from their parents so that they don't have to breed with their parents.
Right.
So it's and that's why I keep explaining that. There's a reason for that biological shift. So when you've got, I have to belong, and so they're looking for connection, they're looking for status, they're looking for how can my mates' faces light up because they like me, the validation. And then you combine it with all of those other things, especially the no GABA. See, we only found out about this. I mean, I taught teenagers.
GABA.
Yeah. I only taught teenagers 44 years ago. I wish I'd known about this. So it's gamma aminobutyric acid, and it is an impulse inhibiting neurochemical. It turns completely off in the teenage years.
Wow.
This is why I bat for boys so much, because it's not their fault. They didn't ask for that to be turned off. They didn't ask for all these drives to happen. They didn't ask for the surges of testosterone. They didn't ask for their brain to get pruned. And there they left floundering around, getting busted and shouted at and shamed for making really dumb choices.
Yeah.
Whereas if we weren't in a modern world with all the things that are potentially dangerous, they probably would be, probably trying to kill saber-toothed tigers and things without enough weapons or something. Do you know what I mean?
Do we have GABA when we're younger?
Yeah. It's turned off and then it comes back on a little bit towards 18. Obviously, the brain's growing each time. And, I used to, I'd be exasperated in my classrooms at times as well because there's no GABA there for a 14-year-old boy. So he lets rip with a fart. Oh, shit, miss, someone's got a stiffy. I can see it from here, miss. Like you go, come on, is that the way we behave? It's the impulsivity of boys who don't want to be in my English class because it sucks.
Yeah.
Who want to have some fun, but who want everyone to laugh. So it's not just about the boys, right?
Yeah.
And those who get it, they won't punish boys like that. They'll just screw their nose up or shake their head and I'll go, oh, yeah, sorry, miss. Do you know what I mean? We correct and we give them suggestions, But I still hear of boys being publicly shouted at and shamed at and criticised, and that is the worst thing you can do to a teenage boy surgeon with testosterone who's desperate to be liked in that space when you shame him publicly.
If you could go back to maybe 1988 to a particular school I went to in Brisbane and let the faculty know, there's probably 1,000-something kids that would be grateful.
And I think we're moving away from the fact that behaviourism is how we change human behaviour, because the research is super strong that unless particularly kids and teenagers feel, relationally safe, in other words, there's a safe growing up near them, they're already going to be in a stress mode. And then if you put them into an environment where they can't succeed, particularly boys, so not only are they feeling kind of no one really cares about me, and now you're going to throw a, like you want me to do that test or you want me to try and write an essay and I'm illiterate. Then you're putting them into a hyper stress state. And then when they can't achieve it, they get punished. That's just beyond ridiculous that we're still doing that.
What can we do for these kids?
Seriously, if I could have done it 45 years ago, you can do it today. The very first thing is you make a classroom safe for every student. And I was co-ed. So when they came in, one of the first things was we need to create some rules, classroom rules. So I'm not giving them to you. We're going to work them out. So you get into some groups and I want you to work out what sort of classroom you want so I can work out what I want and we see if we can put it on the board. So when we cooperate and give autonomy in creating the environment we want, they're all got a buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we still walk in and say, this is the rules. Do it or else. And then we have that conversation. So what happens if somebody, has forgotten what they are? And what do we do in that space? And they have another big conversation about that. There was no shouting in our classroom. So I made these agreements early on. And then the other message was, my mission in this classroom is that wherever you are academically in English, I want you to improve, right? But I'm going to tell you every kid in this class matters equally to me, not just the ones who get A's easily and the ones who can't read. You all matter to me, and I'm here to help you grow a little bit more. And that agreement, no question, hardly ever have they ever heard it.
Right.
And it made a world of difference, right? And so what happens when you've got that, the environment is actually coming from a different place. And then I had to learn, and you would relate to this, I think, Osher. I'm looking around, my first year of teaching, and I'm looking up. Then there's a couple of boys walking around. I go, hey, mate, what are you doing? He said, walking, miss. So what, you walking to get something? He said, no, just walking. And what are you doing, mate? And he said, I'm walking too. Right. So, okay, maybe we might need to do a bit more movement.
Right.
So how about every 20 minutes we do a brain break? We get up and do something. And I want everyone up, right? Yeah. So we started doing brain breaks, which I had never read anything about. That's a good idea. I just intuitively knew because I'm part bloke and I like to walk. Not only that, we had joke breaks. We had put your head on the desk and have a rest break. And no girl went backwards, Osher, in my classrooms. Wow, that's great. But what we found was the boys weren't getting busted because they weren't able to sit still. That fundamental need that helps to regulate the brain. I bet you were a bit fidgety, were you?
Oh, mate. Can you see this on my desk here? So I'm
Yeah,
holding
I
up
know
a little
what they
thing
are.
that I hold with
I
one
know what
hand.
they are, yep.
And I hold it. This one's my favorite, actually. Feel how heavy that one
Keiko's.
is.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Feel the weight of that.
Yeah, that's
it's a goodie, that one.
it's a goodie,
Hey,
hey?
I've got to find ones that make no noise because Andy, my audio producer,
Yeah.
he's like,
He can
"Mate,
still hear it, can he?
Oh, yeah.
God.
Andy's got, I can't hear anything, but Andy's like super ear.
I just love it because, I look back now and neurodivergent wasn't really a big word, wasn't even a word. We did, we knew there were some of our boys that were probably ADHD, but I never, hardly ever had anyone talk about autism in our high schools. They were the quirky ones, particularly boys. And, when I look back at it, when even those kids have a buy into the environment, we're creating an environment that works for them.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone had an input. So that might have been why I might not have noticed them as much. But I definitely, when you got 14-year-old boys who are also possibly ADHD, you have a lot of fun in your classroom. That's all I'm going to say.
It's quite a mix.
You don't always get a lot of work done.
You mentioned the evolutionary reasons for the GABA and other testosterones and things like this, and the just separating from the parents. I can't believe at all that there are evolutionary reasons. There are not evolutionary reasons for neurodivergence. The issue is when you're trying to create a singular system, whether it be an education system, a justice system, sometimes a health system, to fit as many people inside a bell curve as you can on the budget you've got. Yet there are people who are naturally occurring forms of human that just won't fit.
That's right.
And how you then get conformity or regulate behavior on the outside Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad to say that we know a bit more about this stuff right now. But
Not
yeah,
as much as we need to, though, because I
yeah,
still hear, particularly neurodivergent boys, still getting punished for an inability to, concentrate or appear neurotypical in an environment that is
yeah,
already threatening,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I still remember I had this gorgeous boy because I stepped out of the classroom eventually, like a number of years later, and I was working with the boy, building his capacity to cope in the school environment,
Mhm.
right? Giving him structures and scaffoldings and, problem solving. And anyway, I got a call from his mum one afternoon. She was almost hysterical. She said, you got to talk to him. I said, why is that? No, he got in trouble at school, but you wait to hear what he did. Anyway, he came for his chat with me and he says, yeah. So what happened, mate? And he says, oh, yeah, the deputy just absolutely slagged me off in front of a whole heap of kids, like ripped right into me. And I lost it. And I said, oh, because quite often when the amygdala in boys and men gets fired up, it comes out of the body,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So what did you do? He said, oh, I took off. And then I had a great idea after I was hiding away for a while. So I went back and I graffitied his car. And I went, oh, right. And he said, yeah. The only problem is I did it with my name.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't go well, did it?
No.
Right now he's feeling stupid on top of going to
Yeah,
get
yeah.
punished, And I just sat with him and went, yeah, that sucked, eh? He says, yeah, mum's going to lose it. And I said, yeah, she is. You're going to survive this.
You're right.
And maybe that's going to say, next time I get really upset by somebody publicly, what other choices are you going to have? Because until you give, particularly boys, another choice after they've mucked up, there's a really good chance they'll do exactly the same thing again. Right?
Yeah.
It's just one of the quirks that you need a prefrontal cortex to be able to go, great, that didn't work well. So next time I could possibly do plan A, plan B, plan C. So really good humans who work with particularly teen boys are the people safe enough to problem solve with them with possibilities.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, I'm going to say 99% of the time, actually had no intention. Break the window, hurt the kid, hurt themselves, damage the wall. No, that wasn't part of the plan. And yet it happened.
One of the things you met G upstairs,
Mm.
who's 20 now. She was 10 when I met her, and pretty much from early on, both her and her mum kind of look at me like, "Why don't you just do this?" And I try to explain to them, it's like you're thinking about the world with your brain, and I'm thinking about it with my brain, because they're so similar. They've lived together for a long time, and
Yeah.
there's this, I don't know what it is. Maybe there's
No,
an
no.
idea of like, I don't know, we know what to do. How come you don't also know what to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Look, I think that's what kind of blew me away when my first granddaughter turned up, when she was 18 months of age, and I saw her in such a deep thought. And I'm watching her thinking, I wonder what's, you know, I know I raised four sons and I'd never seen them in that deep a thought. Anyway, she went over and asked Daddy for a biscuit. And I went, she has been sitting there working out, how am I going to get what I want? Who do I go to?
wow.
That capacity for deep thought, for pausing before action, is actually pretty typical for a statistically significant number of girls, as the reverse is to boys. They just do it. They're wired for straight away now.
Yeah.
Which is the other reason I wrote Mothering Our Boys, was because all these mums are going, what the hell? Why don't they listen? Why do they do the same thing? Why am I always going, don't do that. Stop doing that. Stop touching that. I said, they're wired differently. I still think it's, we can't prove that our biological drives, but if we know that we can bring things on our genomes, our DNA,
Yeah.
that single focus capacity, when I explain that, a whole lot of relationships improve. And that's that for men, their number one thing was, first, you either protect us, right? That's, they'll lay their life down for us in a second. So they've got to be able to kill really well. Two, if there's nothing you need to kill to keep everybody else safe, then you've got to kill a large protein for dinner. So it's the deer or whatever. And if neither of those need to happen because there's still enough meat, then you're going to go keep practicing killing. And then, you do one thing at a time. You only go and kill one thing. You don't, right? And it's this single focus that frustrates the heck out of a lot of women, because the women in those situations had to do basically everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Looking after the elderly, the sick, the babies, the little tots, making sure the kids didn't drown. You were getting the kind of berries and seeds. You were getting the smaller protein. You were also creating the leather for that. You were getting the medicines, and you were, right? So their brain is wired differently, which is why we've had such an issue talking about how the mental load of modern mums is just drowning them,
Mm-hmm.
because, our world has got even more demands on, particularly the organizer of the family. And we know that most of it's done through a phone, and all the apps from school or wherever can only be on one phone. And mostly that's mums. So they are now spending more time than ever in a disconnected space from their own children, trying to keep all the balls in the air. And obviously they've sometimes put too many balls in the mix because they keep on wanting to do too much. I've burnt out twice. My hands are right there. And for a guy to understand that, who goes, I just do that, finish that, then I go and do that and finish that. Or I do that and I finish that. And we've got all these things, we call it looping, like 9 million things half finished that we're going to get back to, that we lay awake as we go to bed at night going, haven't done this. Whereas men get into the sleep box, which is a single box, and usually go to sleep quite quickly.
So if there's probably someone right now who's doing laundry thinking about there's not enough chicken for dinner and such and such, they're the one that can have broccoli, but the other one can't.
There are 2 birthday parties this weekend.
I've just got a text asking where my fucking socks are. Don't you know where your own fucking socks are?
Yep.
What would you say to that woman?
Okay, if you're with a co-parent, right, you're going to have to sit down and go, my to-do list is too long, dude. I don't care whether it's male or female, but sit down there and go, okay, let's see you make lunches 3 days a week, because your kids are too young. If they're old enough, get them to make their own. Sorry, you got to start stepping them up, because the more the kids do, the less you have to do. So one of the things we need to know with men is that they're wonderful humans, but their memory's not quite as efficient. So if you have been given the lesson in how to do the lunches, take a photo of it. Because there's a chance that you might have to go away for work for a week, or you might have something else you've got to do and you're not there, and then you come back to it and you go, holy, what goes in the lunchbox again, right? So we need to make sure that as we upskill the to-do list, we're giving it the strategies, and I think we've had lessons off Bluey, haven't we, around those things. Thank God for Bandit. Such a beautiful role model.
Greatest dad in Australia. Greatest dad in Australia.
Not perfect though, get it?
No, and that's what I love about it. Good enough dad, yeah.
The other one, and I've done a lot of women's retreats. I've worked with women's retreats for 15 years, and sometimes they need to get away from their family so they can scream the hell out of everything and let all that stuff go, because it builds up in our nervous system that we're never, ever going to get in front. And one of my messages to parents, particularly mums, is you'll never get in front, because they're already wearing their next load of washing. So just drop the bar, aim lower, and stop looking at Insta where the people seem to have all this schmick all sorted, and it's just not real.
I'm listening. I'm in the garden filling a hole, and I'm listening to the Jonathan Haidt book, the latest one.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck me. It's just
big.
Yeah, it really is. The research is good.
Yeah, it's strong. And I love how both him and Jean Twenge refute some of the stuff. People think, oh, no, they're just exaggerating, but his figures and his data. And I love it that there was, I've been concerned for a long time. And I think that's the other reason that I wrote the latest book, Help Me, Help My Team, because there are not enough people to help our kids at the moment. And I also think that our focus on mental health has just maybe got a bit wrong, because I feel that we're not recognizing that our kids can have bad days. They can be moody, they can be shitty, they can get angry, they can have tantrums, and there's absolutely nothing mentally wrong with them, because we're human.
Yeah.
Whereas now I think the pressure on parents, I must keep them happy all the time, or don't let them feel uncomfortable, or I don't want them to, deal with frustration. But actually, we're human and that all happens. So that's been a part of my mission in terms of, okay, let's focus on the fact that you have a teen or a tween who's now had all these changes going on. Change triggers stress in our nervous system. So they've got change happening. They don't even know what the change is. Plus, they've got strange pubes growing and other things growing and things behaving really badly. They're really confused. And what happens when we're usually confused is we get frightened something bad's going to happen, because that's exactly why we're still alive. And so when you get to understand that all of that stuff is meant to be happening, so they usually, growing up, teens save their biggest feelings and angst for the safest human in their life, which is usually in their home.
Yeah, right.
So when I hear of mums copying all this stuff, and from sons and daughters, I keep going, that's because they love you the most. It's a gift.
Yep.
It's a gift.
Yeah.
And we really need to worry when some of those behaviours that give you an uncomfortable feeling yourself are lasting more than 3 weeks, and they're withdrawing, their diet's changing, their sleep's changing. You can see something, there's a whole bunch of things happening. That's when we're going to give you some tips on what you might do together with your teen to see if this is just a moody, dark patch, because it's towards the end of the year, it's near exam time, it's winter, right? Then, and that's the whole aim of it. If we can come alongside our teens when things are hard, and instead of saying, I want to fix it for you, I'm going to walk beside you so you can work a way through this hard stuff, because as an adult one day, we're going to have those moments.
Nobody likes to say no to their kid. You don't want them to be disappointed or sad.
No.
And yet dealing with frustration is a really important thing. And it's probably better that you figure it out when you're 4.5
under 5.
When you're 15 and 85 kilos and the same size as me. I'm a grown man, but with a very not too dissimilar brain to the one you got now. And the damage you could do physically is probably far bigger.
Frustration tolerance. And boredom tolerance. All of these sorts of things that we're really trying to avoid because we want to be these super awesome parents.
Yeah.
Isn't it sad that we've kind of like made it an impossible job? Because usually when you're doing those things, you're also overcompensating for something else in that space. Can I throw in one more thing that happens in the teenage years that I think parents need to know? And that is that their limbic brain, which is kind of in the hippocampus, down there, that central part, it's growing, right? That's where the amygdala is. That's your threat center. So that's more fiery than usual. And in boys, it's way larger.
That's a really ancient bit of the brain.
Really big sense. Always looking at something could be potentially dangerous.
Very little emotion, if any, involved in that.
Right? It's very spontaneous. It's the threat. Is this a threat to my chance of survival? And then the second part is in adolescence, all of the limbic brain fires up. So everything gets more intense, and it gets really intense without the prefrontal lobe growing enough to be able to rationalize it. So that's why you can have massive outbursts, and there's a lot of door slamming, right? And, if you've got boys, again, they'll kick stuff. Or I had one boy come in to my English class, and 10 minutes in, just stood up and kicked the chair, kicked the desk, and then walked over to the wall and punched his fist into a brick wall, and then went out the room. And all the kids were looking at me, and I went, I don't know. Did you know? No, they had no idea. Anyway, I got him a drink of water and sat next to him outside. And I said, what happened? And he said, failed my maths test. He used a few F-bombs in there, but I won't drop them out. And I went,
Well, thank you for deciding to not swear, considering how blue you were from the moment I met you at my front door.
I can have
Don't
restraint.
pretend for a second that you don't talk like a Stephen or Dent.
I do. But what happened was, so he is brewed on his failure.
Yeah, right.
20 minutes. And I talk about the tipping point in teens. We've all got one, But we have the capacity once that prefrontal grows that we go, man, I'm really pissed off about this, or I'm really stressed. I'm going to go and make myself a cuppa and eat a few Tim Tams. Or you would probably go and do some downward dogs and some deep breathing, which is
Mostly
so
the breathing,
beautiful.
because I don't have to move
breathing.
too much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we already have worked strategies of what to do when our body's giving us those messages. Teens haven't. So the last thing that flips them can be sometimes really quite small, like misreading somebody's, someone rolls their eyes.
The famous, what you looking at?
Yeah, what you looking at, that stuff, right?
The famous
And
last words.
it can be, right? So you can imagine being shamed by somebody or someone making a smart ass joke that you don't get.
Yeah.
You want to punch their head in, right? So for that beautiful boy, when we brought him back in the class, and normally probably the school's expectations, what I should have sent him to the deputy to be disciplined. And in my world, I felt that's not going to help anyone. When we got back in the class, all his mates and the kids had put all his stuff back up. And that's where I felt there was this compassion for understanding. Yeah, I've been there.
Did he say anything to you?
Yeah. He just nodded. Because that's another thing. We know that the male brain, when it's really fired up, it goes into the body, but it doesn't often come up into the word center quite until a lot later, unless movement is involved. Whereas the female brain goes to there and out comes the word center, right? And it's a big challenge because a lot of mums want to have it out with their son right after something's happened. He's just no way he's capable of that. And the more we poke the bear, the more likely they're going to kick and, throw something. So I love it that there are some high schools that have recognised that difference. So when a boy actually does get sent down for, to have some sort of consequence for some choice he's made, they often, these deputies, particularly guys, will walk them around the oval and talk to them. So as the more movement you have, the more chance the brain can come back up into the word centre. Wow. The movement calms them down, grounds them into the earth. And if there's spaces, I had this amazing story one day, this boy who I had in my year 12 class, big boy, and he'd said to me a few times how angry he was at his dad, because his dad was a detective, so he worked 5 days a week. And then he took over another business, and this boy just lost his dad. He was there and he was forever working, and he was so pissed. Anyway, over time, that dad was really critical about the things he was doing wrong over and over. Everything I do wrong. Anyway, so it's now like 2 years after he's left the high school, and for some weird reason, he's called me on a landline. You know, that you can get the phone number out of a phone book. Some people might not know what that is. Anyway,
and he's people would sit on them to drive sometimes.
Yeah, that's it. And he said to me, "Oh, Mrs. Dent, how are you?" And I said, "Good." And he said, I just rang up to say goodbye. And I said, "Why? Where are you going?" He said, "Oh, no, I'm going away." So where are you going to? No, it doesn't matter. I just wanted to ring up and say goodbye and say thanks. Every single neuron in my body is fired up. And I'm going, "You're not going anywhere without giving me a hug." Not that I've ever been, I haven't seen him for 2 years. No, it's all good. I just wanted to ring and say goodbye. And he hung up.
Oh, fuck me.
Now, I have raced out. I remember actually having no bra on. I was at home. Fortunately, the dad was home, look after the boys. I've jumped in the bus because we had a bus, we had so many children. And I'm roaring off, and fuel gauge was low, and I'm going, no, I've got to get there, because, of course, country people, we know where they lived. And I've got there and I've raced in, and he's curled up, and he's got 3 different means of ending his life.
Oh, boy. So
I've wrapped myself around him from behind and just held on to him. So he just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And then he said, "I just can't live like this. I'm never going to be good enough for my dad." And I said, "Do you know what? Are you okay if I call you Dad? I want you to walk around out there, and I want you to tell him how hard this is for you." And he says, "No, I can't do it." I said, "Yes, you can do it, because I'm going to be right here." Anyway, I called it, and both Mum and Dad came. They had no idea what was going on. And I said to Mum, "You're staying with me. Those two are going for a walk." Gave him a hug, and they went out in the cow paddock. And we watched them, and every now and then there was just walking and nothing happened. Then there were arms flying out, and there was shouting, and then there was more walking, and there's more walking. There was more shouting and more the arms up, and you go and thinking, "Oh man, have I made the worst mistake in the world here right now?" Big space, walking, nothing else. Then up came another lot of stuff. Anyway, it was about 40 minutes later, and I've looked out, and they're in each other's arms, and they're both sobbing. And that's when I sort of realised that sometimes, through the lens of young men, if they can get to that point that they're in a shame at who they are because they can't please a parent, or they've let a parent down, or they think the parent can't love them, they often get to that point where they say, everyone's going to be better off without me. And when they came back in, it was big. But what was beautiful was Mum didn't actually need to say a thing, which is what we often think Mum's going to sort it out and get everyone to know. But it was handled in a male way, one layer at a time in a cow paddock, where there weren't any weapons either. And that's the other part to it, they're not going to hurt each other if you're just going to. And I think the number of times that a teen boy has shared with me how close they got to ending their life over things that were way too small from my logical, rational place.
Yeah.
And one of them was a 14-year-old boy, a solo mum, and his report card wasn't good. And she was really angry at him because she really wanted the best for him. And he had slacked off. Boys do that. They can't see any point. I've got it covered. Just have to pass just this much. And he fortunately came and saw me. But he said, I think I can't live without my mum's love. So she's withdrawn. Women freeze out. Never freeze out a teenage boy, because he just said, if she can't love me, I can't live. Oof. 14 years of age. So there's this fundamental sensitivity, Osher, under these bravado of the teenage male sometimes, that we can miss. And I think it's, it's driven a lot of my work.
In the course of the time that you've been doing this, though, you mentioned the evolutionary things, which I think I like it as a way to come back to, because it's a fundamental reason to, yes, we talk about bits of the body, we talk about hormones, we talk about parts of the brain and why they work together. It might sound like these big names, but you're going to want to know your battery's flat because your alternator's busted. That's why. That's why your car won't go forward.
My dad would love that.
It's important. It's important to know that. All right, you don't need to know how the alternator works; just know that it's there. And both things have to work. So similarly, there's evolutionary things that you've already talked about. The boys distancing themselves from the parents, girls speaking with other girls. But there's also evolutionary things in how both those people learn in those situations. For example, it's the girls will kind of compare and model off the women right in front of them. The boys will seek out a similarly aged, not their dad, mentor figure to model on, which isn't their own dad. Both these things have got really beautiful and evolutionary reasons and they're successful, right?
Totally.
However, you put a fucking phone in someone's hand and the only pictures the girl is looking at is of girls skinnier than her.
Totally.
Or the only thing the boy's looking at is like, look at my fucking fancy car. Look at all my Bitcoin. I got up at 5 this morning. How come you're not ripped? The money that's being made off these children's misery is reprehensible.
I had to keep putting that book down because it's not the first time that I've there was a documentary a couple of years ago that we were very clearly showing that tech companies deliberately design algorithms to make sure our kids are marinated in negative content, because that means they stay engaged more and therefore more advertisements are seen. So the tech companies make more money. And then, there's that beautiful story. I don't know if you're up to that point in the book about I think she's a 14-year-old girl who eventually got Instagram, and she was so damn excited. And the first 2 weeks was like every dream. She's able to chat to a friend. She's able to see fabulous, fun stuff. She was in absolute heaven. And then the algorithms kick in. And she's articulated later on, it's just a trap. Parents aren't having those conversations about how to be appropriate, to be sexually intimate in a way that's respectful. they think they know it all because they've been watching porn. Or even a boy said to me once, I said, mate, have you got your dad teaching you how to do stuff with the car or something? And he says, no, he doesn't need to do that. And I said, why? He says, there's YouTube. I said, what if you lost your phone, mate? Or what if it's flat? And he went, oh, shit, never thought of that. So the life skills that we knew we had to fundamentally put in place, they think they already get it. And for many of them, they do. And then there's that one other layer in all traditional kinship communities is that as they individuate from their parents, there is always someone there. And it was a collection of not just one lighthouse. It was men took over. It was a responsibility of all the men. Women took over. So we have got so many of our teens who've pushed away from parents as they're meant to, who have nothing else supporting their growth and development other than a toxic space that's messing with their head. And the lighthouses that are around, you know, they're still there, but it's so much harder for them to take up that role that we know you need to gradually grow a child into the adult space, which is why I think, you know, the rites of passage work has been fundamentally, like, it's such a powerful journey. And I've just recently been working with an amazing organisation that has created lighthouses for our First Nations boys across Australia in the Clontarf Foundation. And that's why this organisation creates good men who guide these boys through a love of football right the way through until they're employed. Oh man, that makes my heart sing, because that, if you don't have the guide, and it doesn't have to be a man, you know, like I guide a lot of young lads in that journey. If you don't have the lighthouse, you're going to get crashed on the rocks. And there's a chance you're not going to be able to make the choices that lead you towards creating a life that is sustainable and has meaning, and that you know, can find joy. And welcome to our modern crappy world.
It's crappy, but it's getting less crappy. You know, every time we find something to make it less crappy, there's benefits and side effects to everything. We do have to kind of unpack it a bit.
Let's put it out there. There are so many other benefits. If we didn't have the negative algorithms, so much less harm would happen, because there are so many things that meet our teens' psychological needs online. It's not just social media. It's not just gaming. It's, oh man, there's so much art. There's so many creative, and also there are so many spaces to get support. And it's brilliant for our neurodivergent kids, because it's often the way they do regulate.
Yeah.
But they also find other people who are quirky like them.
Yeah.
So I just want to get rid of the harm, and I know that we can do it. But my challenge, I think, is we need to make parents really angry, which is why I'm a part of the let's ban it to 36, even though we know it's damn near impossible to do. Plus teenagers are too smart and everything will go underground. If we get parents angry and we make teenagers outraged that they're just being used for profits, a bit like vaping, I reckon we might scare the tech companies into thinking, heck, if they banned it to 16, we're going to lose a lot of money. Let's just tweak the algorithm so we can keep them. That would save lives.
I asked a kid the other day, kid couldn't look up from his phone. And I said, he's 13. I said, do you ever smoke? Oh, no. I said, would you ever vape? No. I said, that thing in your hand is designed so you can't put it down. Like, even though you think you can, you can't. I told him, I'm 50. I have an app on my phone. I need it for work, but I have an app on my phone that won't let me open it. And I've got self-control.
And I think also that the other bit that can really help parents understand why it's so problematic, you know how we're talking about the brain pruning, accidentally prunes off things that mean they get more forgetful and more disorganized. So in that window, that's the window most teens will go through self-loathing and self-hatred, right? You know, they're not ripped enough and the girls aren't thin enough. And I mean, body dissatisfaction happened for me, and I didn't have a TV on the farm and I didn't read magazines, right? It's a normal stage of development. Now it's kind of like amped up. But in that same window, the brain not only prunes off the stuff you're not using, it quadruples and goes crazy on how many dendrites it makes. And what that means is you have a window there where you can learn far faster than any time before 5. So you can pick up a musical instrument. I remember Missy Higgins picked one up at 14. You could learn a language. If you're into sport and you throw yourself into it in that window, you improve drastically. You add that into the mix of all those other bits.
Yeah.
But your chances of getting addicted in the window of like 12 to 15 is so much higher.
Yeah.
And they know that, which is the other reason we're talking 16.
Right.
And it's the same with my boys and alcohol. I'm going to make it as hard as possible for you to get anywhere near enough. I don't pay you any money, right? I'm a terrible mother. But there was a reason, because I said at 16, your brain's going to be better. I hated hearing it. But we need to know. So even though it's this window of potential threat, whether it's gaming, it's social media, or it's porn watching, it's God knows what, it has a potential for greatness in the same window. And when parents realize that, I think that can make that a different thing. And I also think if you come alongside your teen and say, look, I just want you to make sure you can use your phone for whatever brings you joy. But in our home, the less time at night, the better. And the more sleep you get, the better. If you start with those two things, work out a way that there's no Wi-Fi in the house after 10. So if you need to connect with your friends, you do it before then. But there's none for us either. So we're not going to be in our bedrooms disconnecting from the family as well. But also we make our worst decisions at night, especially the teenage brain, that what little prefrontal they have goes to sleep. So the worst trolling, the worst stuff out there that hurts others happens at night. So if we just put that one up, and then nobody can, get back online till 7 next morning, you will notice a significant shift in the well-being of our teens.
The
Queen of common sense.
Yeah. The conversation, the thing about, kids or teens or whatever, we often don't want our kid or teen to be the victim. We never really want to entertain that our kid might be the perp.
Yeah.
We never want to entertain that our son might be the one, or our daughter might be the one that bullies the other one until she does something horrible, or our son might be the one that hits a boy so hard.
Yeah.
But that is a reality we have to be with.
And I think not only that, some of the teens I've spoken to about when they get into some of these streaks, these things where it's something sort of, you can't miss the streak or else there's a chance that you'll get kicked out of the group, right? You've got to keep in it.
Oh,
so
right, the app. Okay, so you're talking about one of the apps, I think it's Snapchat. You've got to be...
got to keep in the loop.
add a thing every day, yes.
And also, so if some of them start bad-mouthing another person it's just like those boys again around... I'm going to do something dumb in the classroom to make you all laugh. And that is the power. They do not have a prefrontal that says, my gosh, this could be potentially harmful for that other person's psychological well-being. What is more risky is being turfed out of the group. And I think we really have to hold that in that space, right, around that. And you can say to your son or daughter, hey, that's not the person that I want you to be. That's not our values. But in the impulse in the moment, damn. And that's why one of the saddest stats out there, and I think we've known it for a while, but about 93% of the victims of sextortion are our boys aged 14 to 17. And if you could just put yourself in the body of a 14-year-old boy who has just got some great messages from a girl who seems really keen on him. And as the flirting continues, then she sent some photos of her intimate parts and he's getting really pretty stoked. She's really keen on me. And he does send his dick pic. And, within seconds, they ask for money. And there is just horrendous amount of shame in that space because either way, if they pay the money, they're going to keep you can't catch them. It's a crime and it's just a nightmare. But they are showing this and they just go to everybody. And that public shaming has pushed boys to die because I can't live with it. And it started in a completely innocent kind of way. So we don't even know who the hell they can go and do their cyber safety lessons in class. But in that moment, I think this girl really likes me. You and I could put myself in that situation. I get that.
Yeah.
And yet that can ruin a life.
you mentioned they can do the cyber safety, but being aware of hot and cold decisions, about making a choice in a cold state and rehearsing in a cold state. I was telling you before we started rolling about me rehearsing in a cold
Yeah.
state.
Yeah.
What can, and if this is the first time people might have heard of this idea, what can people talk to their kids about
All right.
with these sorts of things?
Thank you so much. Because inside every single teen is still a wise voice. And they can't hear all the chatter in their head. That's the ego mind. It's just going like a crazy monkey, right? So anytime there's a big challenge you want them to give some more thought to something, you do exactly that. You say, look, you know what? Particularly our boys who need more time to come, I want you to, you want to drop all your subjects and just want to leave school, right? Okay. So rather than go crazy in that moment, we go, okay, so, all right, so how about you sleep on it and tomorrow we'll have another big chat about it, right? So often what I noticed when it was, in the sleep, it's like the higher self comes a little bit up and sows a few seeds of doubt. And that can make a huge difference because what we want them to do is to hear that quiet voice that says, "Oh, I don't know, I think I might be overreacting." Or let me pause for a minute here. And I've seen it so many times with big decisions. I make sure the team comes back and we're going to work through it. By the time they come back to work through it, they've shifted their space. Now, the reason that they're able to shift it is because it's coming from inside them, but also the adult hasn't told them what to do. We are biologically wired from the time we're born to push back when we're told what to do. Toddlers, fierce fours, tweens, all of us. So I think it's how can we come alongside and not tell them what to do and allow them to explore plan A, plan B options. You are then cultivating a thinking process they take forward into adulthood. I know it sounds completely crazy because when people sent their kids to me, fix that kid. He's just awful. And I'd sit down and I'd go, mate, this is however things are going right now. I talk about having a map. The map you're using is not working. So we're going to help you work another map that gets you a bit closer to where you want to be, right? Because you're not bad. You're not stupid. You're a bit lost. And that metaphor lands so often in a teen who's making really poor choices academically, socially, or even out in the space that we don't want them to do crimes and things. Somebody needs to go, hey, there's a different way of going forward. But once again, if they're telling themselves, yeah, no one cares, I'm stupid anyway. I used to hear that so often from boys because I was the English teacher and there was only a tiny percentage of boys who really loved English.
Yeah.
Hey, miss, what do I have to do this for? I'm going to play football for Australia. I say, yeah, you may do, but I still have to teach how to write a structured essay or an argument.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not what I want, right? We just need to give them the information that helps them see that whatever that is in front through their lens rather than just our growing up lens. That's the hardest thing, I think, parenting teens, because we actually know we've already made the same mistake. We don't want them to make the mistake we did.
And that was a big challenge I faced when G would be heading off to her parties as a teenager, or still a teenager, well, she's 20 now, but 15, 16, whatever. And she'd be going to a party at the parents' home. No. Is there going to be alcohol there? Yes. And then Audrey's like, she's not you.
Yeah.
She's not you. Give her space. And it was really hard. But I'm glad I just followed Audrey's lead.
One thing that really helps in the party scenes is rather than doing the lecture, don't touch alcohol, don't touch drugs, don't do. What happens when I say don't think of a blue elephant?
Oh, mate.
Right.
It's blue and it's on a tightrope right
now. Right. It's not
Yeah.
good, right? With a bikini. So my suggestion is to you, okay, you're going to a party. What would you do if someone passed out and it could be an alcoholic coma?
Yeah.
Right? Recovery position, call ambulance straight away, no question. Okay. What would you do if some gate crashes arrive? What are your plans there? Because some of our teens have already got an idea and they're actually a bit more savvy than we think. But every now and then when you go that way, you might be able to add one more suggestion that they will then take on board because it's not the same as you're telling them what to do. So this also might be helpful. Now, I did that for years when I was still working with teens, and I've had emails over the years of teens who've said, just wanted to let you know that, that bit about the alcoholic coma, that I spotted it, and I've been at a party at a uni, and I flipped the kid over into the recovery position and rang the ambos. And the paramedic called out, "Who's called us?" And the guy put his hand up and said, "Me." He says, "Mate, he had 2 minutes. You've saved this kid's life."
Far out.
So I think we need to give them the power to be, the fixer, the one that saves stuff, the one that goes, "Man, I'm just not feeling comfortable about this," when someone takes the keys off someone. You can call them to be what I call a secret guardian, because teens are wired to worry about their friends, but not themselves. They'll do anything for their friends. They just don't think that they matter, really. And that's why, on the way home, make sure you're getting home safely, because a lot of the worst stuff happens on the way home.
Yeah.
Never let someone go off by themselves. Like we turn up and watch out for our friends. But those are the strategies. You're empowering them to do, stepping forward toward the adult you want them to be.
Yeah.
Because you want them to leave home.
Oh yeah, and you want them to be fine. It doesn't really strike me as any much different as a worksite induction where you watch the video that says when you pick up the box of printer paper, bend your knees, and you have to wait for it to end. You can't fast forward through it. You got to click yes, I've read it. It's simple as that.
It is.
And then when it comes to picking up the box of printer paper, even if you've never done it before, you're like, your brain goes, "What knows to do?" And that's the thing that will fly.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go.
Lectures don't work.
Just practice. Just practice what
They
it's going to
don't
be
work.
like. Just practice saying, "No, thanks, I'm fine." Just practice saying, "No, thanks, I'm fine."
That's it.
Let me hear it. Say it out loud.
Yeah.
"No, thanks, I'm fine."
No
and
question.
then I won't ask you again. I'll take you there. It's fine.
Yep.
And then at least you know that in their brain they have this, because in that moment there's going to be, it's height. There'll be a flood. They'll go straight to the reactionary thing, and thankfully our brains will go, "Here's what to do."
Yeah. No, they're more automatic. And then I think one other really big message for parents is, as you're raising your teens through these bumpy journeys, they're going to make big mistakes.
Yeah.
All of them are. No question. Trust me. We've had many stitches and things that we've had to deal with over the years, and vomit in my car. What I want you to keep on reminding them is there's nothing they can ever do that means, we're not going to turn up and still love you. So that when, they crash your car, or actually, I did have that experience. I was racing boys in a paddock one day after a netball game, because I was always hanging out with the boys, and flipped the car. It rolled over. I got thrown out, and it came back and crushed my foot, and I had to ring my dad. You know what? For years later, I've thought there was no question I was ringing my dad.
Yeah.
That's what you want to raise your teen to say. No matter what crap happens, no matter how bad it is, you want to be able to, your first reaction is, "I'm calling my dad, I'm calling my mum, I'm calling my folks," rather than, "For God's sake, don't tell my parents."
Yeah, right.
That means you get the gold star.
Yeah. And that has to be that way. We'll figure everything else out.
Yeah.
You'll figure everything else out. But just we can't get another you.
No.
We'll fix everything else.
Together, we will fix it.
Yes, exactly. I see what you did there. There's, I don't want to. Okay, I'll ask you this, because it is, I did touch on it before. Our news is filled with men do better. Men, you should do better. And a woman dies every week in Australia. But the rates of male on male homicide is double that. The likelihood that I will be a victim of male on male violence is higher than yours. Since the age of 14, walking out of the house, if I see a group of men walking down the street, make myself small, don't become a target, look down, I'm just as worried about male violence. And I'm terrified. Mostly, I'm saying this because my son's 5, nearly 5. He's about to go in a big school, and I'm fucking terrified, man. I'm terrified that he'll be a victim. I'm terrified he'll be a perpetrator. I am, at the same time, as worried about my wife and my stepdaughter. Don't question that at all. But I've been a young man. It is dangerous as shit.
Yeah.
Your likelihood of getting really, really, really hurt is huge. And I don't want violence from men
No.
at all.
Let me start with the first thing, in that no boy is born violent. Being violent is a learned behaviour. We also know that hurt people have a higher chance of hurting others. So essentially, everything that I do in the parenting space that owns the fact that there is an incredible capacity for our dads to be tender, loving fathers, and we're seeing it happen. So there is a plus in that direction. Secondly, we absolutely have to help our little boys to be able to navigate the emotional world better than they are. We also know that, physicality is, physical connection. One of the key things about our boys and the way they connect with other boys when they're little boys is it is not through, oh, golly, I think you're a really cool dude. Do you want to come over to my house for a... But no, they don't. It will be through a punch on the arm, or I'm going to wrestle you. So there's this aggression nurturance, which is perfectly normal and healthy. And then there is aggression that is violent, that is intended to hurt. And they are two very, very different things. What we've also done is we've taken boyhood out of childhood. And in boyhood, packs of kids played together, and also boys. And rough and tumble stuff was normal. And we played games that were a little bit rough around the edges, but we learnt where the boundaries were, like British Bulldog and things like that, like or Chasey in the dark, all sorts of stuff that now we don't do because children might get hurt.
What, you can't play Bull Rush?
No, you can't. No, not in schools.
Political correctness
Schools,
gone mad.
no, God, you can't even do a handstand in some schools. So what we've done is we've made, and really that's another one of Jonathan Hatt's messages, safetyism. Let's keep our kids safe. So our boys weren't having these natural consequences to poor choices with their body.
Yeah, right.
And sometimes they get punished for something that was really just that was only a fun connection moment, right?
Yeah.
That's where I think it gets a bit murky.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as we move forward, we run social emotional learning classes because children aren't playing enough with other children out in the natural world. So that's actually where it happened before. So what we're going forward, you can talk till the cows come home in a classroom about how to be kind and thoughtful. But when your amygdala's triggered, it's still going to come out through the physicality of a boy. So anything we do under 5 that helps boys learn to lose. So I'm really crabby because they took past the parcel out of birthday parties and made it everyone gets a prize. Under 5, if you have a rooster boy, our rooster boys are far more likely to end up being the violent boy. They're more likely to be responding to the man box messages that still exist in our world. You've got to be the biggest, the toughest, the winner, and you've got to be stoic and you don't show pain and vulnerability. So it's the rooster boys, because the sensitive boys, the lambs, they actually have feelings and they're quite considerate and they're beautiful and equally valid. So it's the roosters who have that I have to win or be dominant. They're the ones that need a lot more empathy training in their childhood and a lot more training at learning to lose. And if we did that under 5, we would make a difference in their ability in the hot moments. Also, the empathy building, we know you can build the pathway if it's not there. And that's why I keep saying if you've got rooster girls or boys, get a guinea pig, something that's little, and in the stroking of it and the tenderness of it, they actually build those empathy pathways in the brain so we can actually override it. Of course, I also want it to die because I want them to understand what death is and that it hurts in your heart. And there's a whole lot of lessons in my resilience work there. And also the instant turnaround. We used to play endless, there was all of the games that weren't on a screen. You do not learn to lose on a screen because there's not another human. You actually have to learn with humans. So whatever, hangman, noughts and crosses. I love Spot It. Spot It's fast turnaround. I do that with my grandkids. So every single time we're investing in those, we're building a man's capacity and a teenage boy's capacity in that moment to go, I can walk away. And there is this beautiful work from Peter Gray, who's a play specialist, and he talks about the absence of all those play opportunities early, particularly for boys. They miss what's called a play code. And the play code is built by endless play with other children, where you start to read the micro expressions on the face, which is also what he believes is contributing to the increase in violence, because a person who's potentially a violent human, there is signs on their face, but we're not reading them. So that's the king punches, that's the knives, that's all this stuff. And then what we've normalized online is violence. And I can still remember, like, it's probably 8 or 9 years ago, I remember going into the last DVD shop. I thought I'd go and have a little look. I couldn't find something for me to watch because nearly everything is violent. We are marinating our kids in violence. We are desensitizing them to violence. And then we put them in front of hardcore porn, which is equally as violent. And we're wondering what's happening to our boys.
Uh,
How about that?
what do we do now, Maggie? What do we?
So we need to nurture the tenderness that is inside little boys before 5, because we are still speaking to them more harshly because we think they're tough. We shame them in our classrooms. We shame them in, I'm sad, I've seen it in early childhood. We push them into school before they're cognitively ready, so they become failures. And when they're failing, they're going to be angry. And when they're angry, that's got to come out.
Yeah.
We have an education system that's not honouring that boys need more movement in classrooms, that they get busted because they can't sit still because they have less dopamine. You've got me started on something I can go for 4 hours. Our school system is not supporting the healthy raising of our boys because it stole the age of 5. Steve Benoff has said, for a long, long time that our boys are needing more time to be able to manage the social, emotional, and cognitive expectations of a classroom where formalised learning is taking place. If you tried to do that in an outside classroom, you'd probably nail it, right? So we've got some fundamental things, but I think we can each chip away at some of those. And we need to be able to address the fact that, our world should be safer. It's a given. And I have, 7 precious little grandchildren that I'm equally as concerned about. I know, nearly the 8th. And then I think they're all retiring on me. But I am equally as concerned. But there's a part of me, I've got a dog and I walk it, and I live in a lovely country town. And sometimes I come to places like Sydney and I think, I don't think I'd walk my dog here just because of the pure increase in numbers of humans.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it rips my heart out that we have such a significant increase in family violence. That crushes me because I believe in, creating families that are functional, and it just makes me so sad.
We talked about the evolutionary thing, and I've recently been kind of on this trip that you and I, physiologically, if, say up in Greenland, they pull a human out of an iceberg, a glacier, fundamentally, we are identical.
Yeah.
All right? Someone 300,000 years ago, this is what we are. So we can't ignore how our bodies and brains work because that's the world they were designed to, right? And yet we also can't ignore that evolutionarily, there are reasons for all of that. The community, the helping, the ta-ta-ta. For a long time, it's understandable why, and for a long time culturally and religion, which often help that sort of carry forward. As we moved more and more a secular world, it's a little more on us to make sure that happens. So what are things that, you mentioned movement, you mentioned dance, like that's something Wolf and I do quite a bit, like dance, singing, these are really important things to do. You don't have to do them in time or in key, just do them. What are some other things that parents might be able to do for themselves to almost kind of, as best we can, replicate that environment that we have evolved to exist in?
Firstly, that village concept, of course, is fundamentally still important to us in terms of you're far more at risk if it's just a very small group compared to big. My message to parents is find the tribe rather than the village. It's impossible to find the village except if you live in country towns where everyone knows what's going on anyway, and they'll tell you what you're doing because you don't know yourself.
Flip the car in a paddock.
Right, yeah.
Oh, limpy.
Yeah, that's it, like that, right? So a tribe means it's a smaller group, but what it is the humans who are in your life around your children. So whether it's the people with kids the same age, the teachers within your school environment who really are on the same page, is that we actually consciously need to create a sense of connectedness because our kids need to feel safe with some other people other than us. And I challenge parents quite often, if your car breaks down on the way to pick your kids up, who can you call who you know can walk up to the school because they're going to be there because you know they're going to be there. That's the first thing. You'd know they're going to be there. Two, the school knows that they are the safe person that you get on with and they're going to pick up your kids. How many of you have got that?
Wow.
Right? That's the stuff that matters. And also, when we went through COVID, it was really how we were all kept away from each other, how fundamentally that did everyone's heads in, right? So the second part to that is we are a social species. We're not a me species. What is online is very much a focus of me. So do anything you can that encourages the we in your family. It's us as a system. It's us as a tribe. Yep, going forward. And my other big suggestion, so whoever you're co-parenting with, it's hard. Parenting's really hard. Like, I don't think we'd breed if we knew how hard it was going to be, really. I think we'd just go, no, thanks, I'm out of here. That whoever you're co-parenting with, have a really honest conversation, not only about sharing the to-do list, but what is it that you need to do for at least twice a week for an hour and a half that fills your cup, and prioritize that. Make sure either of you just works out how can we fit that in for each of us as the grown-ups, because unless we've got a full cup or a half full cup, we can't pour into the little ones in our house, and everything's not going to work as well. And every now and then, just keep recognizing that there is no such thing as perfection in parenting, and that every age, every stage will have a gift and a challenge, and that just beating yourself up because you've had the shouty moment, you've lost something, or like me, left one at the pool, you're not a lousy parent. You're a parent just doing the best you can, right? You just get back up, focus on connection, and get back up the next day. Let yourself off the hook and have another crack.
You said that no one would become a parent if they knew how hard it is, right? I was told when I got sober by a person whose name I won't mention, but they were, a famous person, said, listen, man, if you go after this with 50% of the energy that you went after the fandanglery it took to organise the binges and everything, you'll be fine, right? Because trust me, you've got the capacity. In the same way, I would say that, it's hard as anything, but how amazing it is will actually eclipse that.
Yeah.
And what you get out of it as well. It's
absolutely.
It's been an extraordinary 10 years. I won't tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
yeah.
And I get up every day excited as to wow, this is fun, because they're new every day.
Yeah.
Every day. It's fantastic.
I think also what we can do when we're tired and there's a lot of pressure on us is we just focus on all this shit stuff. We keep forgetting to focus on the good bits, whether it's, the movie night with popcorn and farts on the couch, or we're cooking pancakes together, or we've just been to the beach and had the best time. I think we just got to create those, I call it pockets of joy in homes that we repeat often, because what your kids remember are the repeated pockets of joy, not the crap, right? The more we can create that, the more the brain has a capacity to anchor those memories. Yeah. And sometimes we just need to lighten up a heck of a lot more, because seriously, it's more funny than it's awful. And it releases cortisol at the same pace as screaming or crying. I just go for laughing.
The idea that all those little tribes that you're talking about would intersect, you know, bit by bit by bit.
Yeah.
And then what have you got? You got all these people that cross over.
Yeah.
It seems like a far lovelier city to live in.
Totally. And it's possible and it's doable.
For people who are listening, I've made a model with the placemats on the table to demonstrate the Venn diagram.
And the crossovers say, let's turn up in the parks more often. Let's turn up and let's just, let's just have more fun.
You said you could talk for 4 hours. I could talk to you for 4 hours. And I'm pretty sure there's 4 o'clock. I'm probably going to have to go get on the bicycle and go get a son from daycare.
Better go and get him.
He's good. He's good, lad.
So good. And how just... like, you didn't know that was in front of you, Osher. The magic that either Giorgio or
no, either Gio or Wolfie. No, I didn't.
You just didn't know it was.
I didn't know I'm not going to lie, I wasn't prepared for the challenge of stepfatherhood. It is I might have to chat to your mate, Steve Biddulph, about it. Or maybe, you and I could do something about it, because it's the part of fatherhood that people don't talk about.
Yeah. Bonus dad.
Yeah. It is way harder than anyone would ever think about. And it is more rewarding than anything I could, similarly rewarding. And
it's all about love.
It is.
It's
yeah.
You get out of your own way. It doesn't have to be a biological connection.
Yeah.
That's why, heads off to all the foster parents out there and all the adopted ones and all the grandparents looking after. At the end of the day, it's just love.
What's amazing is that when we talked about my school, like, this conversation would not have happened in the public space when I was at school in my lifetime. All right. That work that you do would not have been it. And that, particularly because it's so much based, as much as you come across, you're based in research, which is what I truly, truly, truly love. And, my parents are both doctors, and if the research shifts, you're like, okay, well, I guess we'll try this. We used to do this, but the status shows long term. So that's the thing that
it's kind of nice when the research comes up and backs something you've done intuitively. That's like really
I'm sure.
Beautiful gold.
Mate. Oh,
it's like,
look.
we've finally got evidence. I just was having a crack at something that I felt right.
Yeah. But it's really important, like, particularly if if you're asking for money for a policy intervention.
Totally.
You need to be able to go, here is why. Not just because I feel it. It's important to be able to show it. And I'd vote for you. Vote one, Maggie Dent. Thanks. Wow.
Thank you.
You're sitting with me in podcast mode. You're not sitting with me, and like, you haven't asked me to do something 4 times that I then ask you, hey, what do you want me to do with this? And I've completely forgotten that you've asked me to do it 4 times. And
I've raised 4 sons, dude. I'm really well trained in that. And even today, I love my boys, and they're really intelligent men. But every now and then I ask them to tell their beautiful wife something, and it doesn't happen. And I'll just really... We were laughing the other day because I called up for a video chat with one of them, the one that's in Sydney, and it was a little bit tricky with the siblings. They were having a few words, so they're going to call Nanny back, or I'll catch you after dinner, Mum, no question. Next day I'm talking to the daughter-in-law, and the son comes in and says, I was going to call you back, wasn't I? I went, yeah, I knew you'd forget. It's all good, love. Just love him. He's so smart. They were forgetful.